Thank you. Chair Novotny, do you want to move the House File 7 is recommended to pass and be referred to Ways and Means Committee?
That is my motion.
Chair Novotny, please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Vice Chair Whitty. House File 7 represents the priorities of the House Republican Caucus in the public safety area. The bill's themes are helping law enforcement make our communities feel safer from criminals, keeping violent and dangerous offenders off the street, and holding the criminal justice system accountable. There are 12 different provisions that comprise this bill that come from bills that Republican members have authored. Many of them have been authored in previous biennia, but the House DFL majority has not given them a hearing. Law enforcement has requested most or several of these provisions. Several sections have been in response to heart-wrenching stories that we continually hear of violent criminals who are out on the street reoffending. Finally, there are some provisions of this bill that have come from the frustrations of the public when it has to deal with the changes coming from charging and sentencing practices by the criminal justice agencies. There have been dramatic increases in carjackings and stolen motor vehicles in the last 5 years. Many of these crimes are committed by juveniles, some as young as 12. They use these stolen cars to commit more crimes and often bait police into chasing them, knowing they won't be prosecuted. There are a handful of provisions in the bill that law enforcement has requested to get a better handle on these crimes. They include an increased penalty for fleeing in a reckless manner, excessive speed, running stoplights, running stop signs, putting the public at a greater risk of serious injury or loss of life, making it a crime to be in a stolen vehicle. Under current law enforcement can only arrest a driver, but they know that everyone else in the car is aware the car was stolen. And the passengers usually played an active role in stealing the car to start with. Authorizing law enforcement to place tracking devices on fleeing vehicles. This law was enacted 2 years ago to allow law enforcement agencies to put tracking devices on a reported stolen vehicle. That law also needs to be amended to allow the placement of the tracking device on a vehicle when it is occupied as well. This bill does that. There are other public safety concerns that law enforcement and the public have brought to us in the past few years. This bill seeks to address those concerns. It increases the penalty for blocking highways, freeways, transit, and roads to and from an airport. These are dangerous practices for the people involved, as well as for emergency vehicles that may not be able to get to a fire or a hospital with a person that is in a life-threatening situation. It increases the penalty on people who conspire to trespass on or damage critical infrastructure such as pipelines, utility lines, and substations, as well as water and sewer lines. Peace officers who have been under assault, both figuratively as well as literally in the last recent years, is one of the reasons that peace officers have been leaving the profession in droves. This bill includes a penalty increase to felony level for assaulting a police officer. Some of the violent crimes this bill addresses includes a mandatory minimum of 10-year sentence for predators that engage in first-degree sex trafficking, and predatory offender registration required for offenders who engage in criminal sexual conduct and receive stayed sentences. Finally, this bill brings sunlight to the practice of our criminal justice partners, many of whom work very hard every day to keep our communities safe, but some of whom have been a revolving door that spins criminals back out on the street before their paperwork is processed. This bill requires a greater public disclosure of who pays bail for someone to get out of jail, a publicly searchable database for county attorney case dismissals, a publicly searchable database for criminal sentencing reductions, and legislative approval for sentencing changes promulgated by the governor-appointed, unelected Sentencing Guideline Commission. The provisions of this bill are not the only solutions House Republicans have, but they represent a cross-section of bills that we will make in the coming session to help our communities be safer. I have several testifiers with me to speak to this bill.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Will your testifiers go up one at a time? And please state your name for the record and begin your testimony. We'll have the first one, Ramsey County Sheriff Bob Fletcher. Next up, Shane Myrie, Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association President.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Bob Fletcher, Ramsey County Sheriff. Thank you for having me, Representative Novotny. You ready?
Go ahead, sir.
First of all, thank you for everything you've done, and for those of you that I've worked with here over the years, appreciate your efforts. And we've been here many years, and sometimes more successful than others. Of course, we stand here in support of the entire House File number 7, but there are some pieces to this bill that we worked on 2 years ago that didn't make it through conference committee when things, of course, didn't resolve. So I want to speak about 4 of those, if you don't mind, and then I have one other little item at the end that I want you to think about. Aggravated fleeing. We've had amazing success in our county at curtailing auto thefts and carjackings. The statistics are such that we're decreased them by 90%, and 90% in the carjackings, and the auto thefts by probably 75%. Some of our CAT team members are here in the audience. You see Deputy Kill, Deputy Siegelstrom, and over here, Deputy Sparks and Sparks. We've had amazing success. They do an amazing job. But we would not have been able to reduce crime without pursuing suspects. Crime is impacted by career criminals that are doing this on a daily basis. I have been at this since 1977, and I will tell you that the focus has to be on arresting the people that are doing this day in and day out. The occasional crime, the occasional offense is different than these career criminals that are out there. And so recovering a stolen car does us no good because they go out and steal another one. We have to actually arrest the person in the car to impact crime. And the statistics on our side of the river are amazing compared to other jurisdictions across the river in Minneapolis. There's a lot of reasons for that. The lack of police officers is prominent amongst them, but also different policies. So we need to be able to pursue, and we need to be able to apprehend and incarcerate people that violate the law. As you know, there's an existing fleeing police statute already in statute, and there are 3 other enhancements if you substantially harm someone or great bodily harm or kill someone. All those enhancements are great. We appreciate them. But for the most part, these chases do not evolve into someone getting seriously hurt. But they do endanger the public and endanger us. For instance, our most frequent problem is these people will drive on the opposite side of the road, thinking that most departments will not be able to pursue them when they're on the wrong side of the road. Most departments, including us, curtail chases. We happen to have some uniqueness to what we do and enough bodies that we can curtail and follow at a reasonable speed. We use the State Patrol helicopters, the most valuable asset we probably have in terms of helping us catch these individuals. But we have to catch them. You can't curb crime until you catch them. There are many things you may want to do after you catch them. And I'm here to say that actually you can decrease crime. You can arrest your way out of the crime problem. It's what you do after that with the criminal that makes the difference. So this enhancement would, if they're fleeing on the wrong side of the street, they're blowing stop signs left or right. And what we didn't add in here is the night lights. I think if that's possible, Mr. Chair, we can add that as a third one, extinguishing lights. But you have two additions here, wrong side of the road and not obeying lights. If we can add the extinguishing of lights, that would be a big help. What that does is it makes it a 5-year felony and enhances the penalty and the sentencing guidelines. Second, occupy a stolen vehicle. It's been said, we arrest a lot of groups of kids in stolens. They all know the car was stolen, or they reasonably should have known the car was stolen. Our system of justice really only allows us to charge the driver of the car. We do try to use the receiving stolen property statute, but we never have a county attorney that really wants to charge under that. So having a law stating that if you reasonably should have known it was stolen when you occupied it would be a huge help. Disrupting traffic, I'll let others speak to that. I know the State Patrol is been very involved in that. We would like to see that as well. Tracking vehicles. Now, Rich Neumeister, my old college buddy there from Hamlin University, and I have been friends and advocates and on opposite sides of issues for, what, 50 years now? It seems like it, since we graduated from Hamlin. Rich Neumeister is going to want to oppose what I'm about to say. But in the spirit of being able to catch the criminal and stop them from stealing another car, we need the ability to track the car. And we need the ability to put a tracker on the car when it's not occupied. Now, the current law allows us to get a hold of the owner and get the owner's permission. And we do that with great success. What do we have, Thomas, 50% success, 60? So we can't always get a hold of the owner. We find the stolen car, we know that some bad guys are inside the house, they're gonna come out. Recovering the stolen car does us no good. They're gonna go out and steal another car. We need to catch them in the car. And the best way for us to catch them is to be able to put a tracker on that car and monitor where they're going. Just stolen vehicles, we're just talking about stolen vehicles. If we haven't been able to reach the owner, or if it's a rental or something, we need to be able to put that tracker on the car. And then our team of half a dozen to 10 CAT members will intervene, we call it a VIT maneuver, and block that car in and arrest them for being in a stolen car. That's how crime goes down. So this statute eliminates that one line that Rich Neumeister was successful in inserting in conference committee 2 years ago, where it says is occupied, okay? So that would be a huge help for us. The only other thing I want to mention, there are some other good pieces of the bill, and I know Shane will probably comment them. Are you aware that Representative Pinto authored a bill 2 years ago to raise the age of delinquency?
Recording in progress.
Raise the age of delinquency. Dave must be listening. So there's a statute that has been passed and is taking effect next year that raises the age of delinquency from 10 to 13. What this means is we will no longer be able to arrest 11 and 12-year-olds who are driving stolen cars. And we can use the children in need of protection, but that's a much more complex process. And it's no secret, you've heard Chief O'Hara and others talk about how young these offenders are getting. That bill didn't get any discussion. Somehow it was slammed through in the late hours or last minute. I would encourage you to take a look at that and see if you can, A, extend the timeline on that, or B, phase the years in. Instead of going 10 to 13 in June of next year, 10 to 11 one year, maybe 11 to 12. See how this is working before we're ready to say, cops, you can't arrest anybody. Because you couple that with Mary Moriarty's posture on who can be arrested, and you couple that with the consent decree that Minneapolis is now under, you're going to find that cops are not going to have the tools to arrest 12 and 13-year-old offenders. It's just, we're gonna lose some of the tools. And sometimes they're extremely poorly behaved. So thank you for your time. I don't know, want to get me out of here? Questions?
Hey, we'll do questions at the end, and we have a bill.
Hey, one more thing though, I'm gonna pass this around there just, before I go. This is, it's a copy of the Minnesota statutes regarding disorderly conduct, unlawful assembly, and obstructing a legal process. And in case you need us, we're available. We do these arrests on a regular basis, based on what I saw yesterday.
Thank you, Sheriff Fletcher. Next up, Shane Myrie, Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association President. Next up, after that, Jeff Potts, Executive Director, Chiefs of Police Association. And it also looks like we have Dave Titus from NPPOA.
Mr. Chair and members, my name is Shane Myrie, and I'm the president of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, or MPPOA. At the outset, I'd like to thank the authors and the co-authors of this bill for bringing this bill to committee so fast in the session. To the men and women, to the law enforcement officers in the state of Minnesota, it means a lot, and it's important to know that our elected officials put public safety up towards the top of the issues that they're going to work on during this legislative session. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today to testify on House File 7. At MPPOA, we represent the rank and file peace officers and public safety professionals from across the state of Minnesota. There are several provisions in House File 7 that our members support. First, with the proposed language at Section 8, updating the statute concerning fourth-degree assault on a peace officer. As has been entered into the record on prior occasions, according to BCA data and local media reporting from 2024, between 2017 and 2023, the number of assaults on officers in the line of duty has tripled from 419 to 1,179. This, of course, is of great concern to our members and their families. And as I said at the outset, we appreciate our elected officials engaging on this issue. In looking at the bill as drafted, I would also consider the option of adding an aggravated sentence if an individual has a prior felony conviction for fourth-degree assault involving demonstrable bodily harm or intentionally throwing or transferring bodily fluids on an officer. Additionally, in addition to assaults on peace officers, I know our public safety partners in the corrections field are also dealing with being assaulted in the line of duty. The 87 sheriff's office across the state of Minnesota, the 87 counties, we have detention deputies that work side by side with our licensed peace officers, and counties have individual community corrections officers that work side by side with our licensed peace officers. So I would also consider the option of looking at the fourth-degree assault against the corrections officer statute with the same aggravating language if there is a prior felony conviction for fourth-degree assault on a corrections officer. Second, with regard to the proposed language at Section 10 concerning fleeing in a motor vehicle, as the sheriff mentioned, our members, the rank and file, have encountered numerous times on Minnesota roads the unsafe behavior by fleeing suspects. It's created a public safety crisis on our roadway. Fleeing suspects create dangerous and sometimes deadly consequences for themselves, innocent civilians, and law enforcement. As the sheriff mentioned, the current fleeing peace officer statute has a 3-year cap for simple flee, and then on the other side of the statute, it has a tiered approach for death, gross bodily harm, or substantial bodily harm. So there's a gap between those two sides of the statute, or between the two extremes. Our membership believes that adding language to cover actions that go beyond simple flee, but do not result in death, gross bodily harm, or substantial bodily harm is a good public policy decision. This would address fleeing such situations where fleeing vehicles leave the roadway and drive on sidewalks or end up driving the wrong way on a roadway against or into oncoming traffic. Third, with regard to the proposed language at section 11, creating a new criminal provision for illegal presence in a stolen motor vehicle, again, as the sheriff mentioned, our members are currently dealing with stolen vehicles in joyriding every day. Oftentimes, these stolen vehicles are occupied by more than one individual. In talking with individuals that are our members that focus on auto theft, they also indicate that sometimes we've been able to get people charged with tampering for being in a stolen motor vehicle as well. The difference in why this statute, in the way of handling it in House File 7, is beneficial is it again has a tiered approach. The tampering statute is just a straight misdemeanor. The way this statute is written in House File 7, there's a misdemeanor for a first offense, and then if you're convicted and you do it again, it becomes a gross misdemeanor. That is a point of getting, whether it's juveniles or young individuals that are involved in this auto theft or joyriding, it's a way to illustrate the importance of the actions, the wrongness of their actions, and it will be able to establish that record and elevate it if they continue to do it. And fourth, with the regard language, the proposed language to removing the requirement that a reported stolen vehicle be occupied prior to law enforcement being able to apply a mobile tracking device on a stolen vehicle. Our members support this change for three reasons: safety, safety, and safety. If we're able to slap a tracker or apply a tracker to an unoccupied vehicle, we can conduct surveillance on that vehicle. We can watch people exit the house, get into the vehicle. We can have descriptions of individuals. We'll know where they're sitting in the car. We'll know if they'll have bags or anything with them. And then we can conduct follow-up surveillance on that vehicle. And then, most importantly, law enforcement will be able to conduct a traffic stop and a subsequent arrest operation at a time, place, and manner that is designated by law enforcement. This will also take into account the safety of the vehicle occupants, innocent civilians, and law enforcement personnel conducting the operation. Mr. Chair and members, thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Next up, Jeff Potts, Executive Director, Chiefs of Police Association. And then after that, Tad Farrell, Mayor of Floodwood, via Zoom.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the invitation to be here today. Members of the committee, my name is Jeff Potts. I serve as the Executive Director for the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. We represent roughly 310 police chiefs across the state. The vast majority of our members, 70% are from agencies 20 officers or smaller, and so that gives you a little bit of an idea what the demographics are of the police agencies. And so obviously we represent the larger agencies too, but the vast majority come from small and rural departments. We appreciate the bill that was written here. We've had a chance to look through it. I'd like to speak specifically to 7 of the provisions in this bill that directly align with the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association's legislative agenda for 2025. I'll start on page 5, subdivision, or section 3, subdivision 6A. This one and the next item that I'd like to talk about kind of relate to judicial and prosecutorial transparency. For a few years, our association has been before committees here in the legislature advocating for more transparency. We have seen some decisions, some charging decisions that are quite frustrating to our members and to communities, frankly, and have been advocating for more transparency. And I want to be clear, when we say prosecutorial transparency, judicial transparency, we aren't suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we want to curb or curtail the discretion that prosecutors have. We feel, though, there should be more transparency in the decisions and the programs that they offer that lead them to making their decisions. And what I see on page 5 related to judicial, essentially judicial transparency, and page 7 report on dismissals with agreement of the prosecutor, that's page 7, subdivision 16, that those both directly align with our legislative agenda items on those two areas. The next one is on page 8. As mentioned by the previous two testifiers, assaults on police officers have increased. And for those who weren't here yesterday, our association testifier, Chief Brady Jewell mentioned this, but in 2023, which is the last year that we have a BCA crime report, there were 2,006 assaults on police officers. Compared to 2019, which we oftentimes use 2019 as kind of a benchmark for what we have seen in terms of crime increases, there were 467. And so more than double, close to actually 60-some percent, 61%, I think, increase. And so we think that what is outlined here in Section 8 will help address assaults on police officers. Next, on page 9, fleeing police officer cases have also increased. To give you some scope on the numbers, 2023, there were 2,262 fleeing cases. That has actually been pretty steady for the past several years. And so we think a bill that increases the penalty will help address. Now, agencies have begun to have different metrics and how they decide or determine whether or not they stay involved in those, are constantly evaluating the risk and reward. And you have seen, and we have seen, in fact, the sheriff alluded to this, that agencies are more careful in terms of how many vehicles they pursue and the factors that they consider. But we do believe that penalties like this, that stiffen the penalties for those who decide to flee, will help increase and turn that curve back downward. And so we very much support that. The next one, subdivision 2A, which is on page 10, the illegal presence in a stolen vehicle. Again, I want to remind you from the statistics that we reported yesterday, in 2023, there were 15,612 vehicles stolen here in Minnesota. That's a slight decrease from 2022. We haven't seen the numbers from 2024 yet. They'll come out later this year. But that is a considerable increase from 2019 when there were about 11,000 vehicles stolen. BCA crime report and all of the statistics that we see do indicate there is a large percentage of those vehicles stolen or occupied by juveniles. And so we very much support this provision on page 10 when we know that that will help kind of curb the numbers on auto thefts. The next provision is on page 13. Which is the exception, the vehicle tracking device exception for fleeing vehicles. As I just mentioned, agencies are very carefully looking at when they allow officers to pursue. Many of them have invested in technology that allows them to deploy a tracking device literally on the road when the vehicle starts to flee. It's called Star. There's other vendors. One of them is Star Tracker. But that technology has been essentially rendered useless in a recent interpretation of the current tracking bill. And so as agencies have tried to figure out ways through the use of stricter policy, but utilizing current technology to reduce the dangers of pursuits, we feel that it's very reasonable when a vehicle is fleeing that they would be able to deploy this device during the time that the vehicle is fleeing. What that allows them to do is back off. A lot of the dangers and the injuries and deaths that occur in pursuits are when they're at those extreme high rates of speed. The sheriff talked about vehicles traveling in the wrong way. If you have this technology and you're able to deploy it, we know that in many cases, the speeds are going to almost instantaneously slow back down. The officers are going to have a way to track it and very quickly go be able to find the vehicle, hopefully find the folks that are associated with or were in that vehicle. But we do believe that the ability to use this type of technology and track that vehicle will allow those pursuits that do continue to be much safer. There are definitely other elements of the bill, Mr. Chair, that we support. We look forward to working with you throughout the session to help provide more input and answer questions about the other provisions, and hopefully also address some of the other items in our legislative agenda. But I very much appreciate the time here today, Mr. Chair, and run this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Potts. We're having a little internet issue. I'm going to go to David Zimmer, Public Safety Policy Fellow at Center of the American Experiment.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. I took a slightly different approach. I've been communicating with staff with some humble suggestions on some edits, and I'll limit my comments to kind of some more broad topics. My name is David Zimmer. I'm the Public Safety Policy Fellow with Center of the American Experiment, a position I've held for the past 3 years following a 33-year career with the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office. I appear here today in support of House File 7 for two broad reasons. First, it provides much-needed improvement in access to and transparency of criminal justice system data that is imperative to the proper evaluation of criminal justice system outcomes and to the development of sound public safety policy. And two, it aligns with the goal of ensuring our criminal justice system is a consequential system and not one of failed second, third, and fourth chances. The term accountability has quietly slipped into our criminal justice system vocabulary, but accountability does not equate to consequential. The revolving door of justice has damaged public safety in Minnesota, and this House File 7 stands as a solid first step towards repairing that damage. Specific to the data, House File 7 would create publicly searchable databases of sentencing data and charging and dismissal data by county attorneys. This would apply sunlight to some of the more troubling outcomes of our system and allow researchers the ability to provide more timely and pertinent information to policymakers. Public access to the data would focus, again, on more timely attention to some of the unacceptable increases in sentencing departures, which now stand above 42% for presumptive prison commitments, and on charges dropped, which really for right now aren't even reported or available. And finally, on mandatory minimum sentencing being avoided by our judges. Currently, that data is only available on firearm cases, and the data shows that just 29% of applicable firearm charges receive the mandatory minimum sentencing as directed by statute. Transitioning to the consequences, specific to increasing consequences, two important crimes are addressed in House File 7 that I believe could have significant impact on reining in the lawlessness we have witnessed in Minnesota in recent years. First, assaults on police officers, and second, fleeing police in a motor vehicle. You've heard some of these statistics in previous testimony, but per the BCA, over the past 4 years, there have been nearly 5,000 assaults on Minnesota police officers, resulting in 2,106 injuries. 1,436 of these assaults were considered aggravated assaults, and 240 of the assaults involved a firearm. 40 of these assaults were considered ambushes, and 5 involved the murders of our peace officers and a tactical medic. Comparing data from 2017 to 2024, our peace officers have been subjected to an incredibly troubling increase in assaults, equating to a 190% increase in all assaults, 164% increase in injuries to officers, an incredible 475% increase in assaults on officers using a firearm, and a 100% increase in ambush assaults on our peace officers. Of course, these increases include the tragic ambush murders of 5 Minnesota first responders in the past 2 years. Expanding that surge regionally to include the eastern borders of North and South Dakota, the northern border of Iowa, and the western border of Wisconsin, I found that in just 18 months, no fewer than 27 law enforcement officers in our region and 1 tactical medic have been shot and injured by gunfire. 9 of those officers and 1 tactical medic were killed during those shootings. This is an unprecedented level of violence directed towards our law enforcement. And the tragic loss of those officers has been devastating to their loved ones, their agencies, and the communities they served. Transitioning to the proposed amendments on fleeing a police officer in a motor vehicle. I'd start by noting that we are at a disadvantage in knowing the true numbers of fleeing incidents, as we track only those fleeing incidents where law enforcement engages in a pursuit. I'd submit those numbers do not reflect the true magnitude of the growing number of fleeing incidents that endanger us all. Using data from the BCA, it is clear that far too many offenders feel there are no consequences to fleeing the police. In the past 4 years, there have been 11,596 pursuits in which law enforcement has terminated 4,863 out of a concern for public safety. The remaining fleeing pursuit incidents have resulted in 857 crashes, over 1,000 injuries to citizens and officers, and 20 deaths. Anecdotally, my son is a current sheriff's deputy working patrol in the metro area. He has personally shared with me stories of pursuing and arresting young teens in stolen vehicles, only to have them casually fall asleep in the backseat of his squad, completely unconcerned with having been arrested or the possibility of facing any real consequences. In Minneapolis and in other metro areas, it is now becoming common for young teens and stolen vehicles to initiate chases and then to ram pursuing police cars. It has literally become a dystopian sport. I'll note that in my research of these cases, the flee charge is often the first to get tossed in a plea agreement, though once again, we lack solid data on that situation. In summary, the current lack of consequences for these crimes serves to desensitize society to lawlessness and disorder. Efforts such as House File 7, which attempt to strengthen consequences, are much needed and have my full-throated support. Thank you.
Thank you. We're still having some technical difficulties. I'm going to call Mr. Neumeister up to testify. You have 1 minute for testimony.
Mr. Chairman, for the record, my name is Rich Neumeister, and for those people who are new to the legislature, I've been here since the late 70s as an advocate on open government and privacy, and I've helped current legislators and past legislators on policy on open government and privacy. A lot of initiatives also. This bill addresses legislation that was done in 2022 with Senator Mark Johnson as the chief author, and I forget who was the chief author in the House at that time. So it was a bipartisan kind of agreement that happened here. The issue here is that we're using technology to place on a vehicle a tracking device, which gathers a lot of information on individuals. This was a compromise that was worked out. And I say that compromise should continue. You got to remember a little bit, this was because of the star chaser that was being discussed. There's already exigency circumstances where you can still put a star chaser on, but folks still wanted language. What this will allow to do is that without a person in there, as a police officer may run down a street, a public place, whatever, oh, that car is stolen. Let's put a beeper on. If it's confirmed by the data check. no, to the best of my knowledge, no other entity in the country does that kind of thing. This pushes the boundaries of the Fourth Amendment. And I wasn't aware that there was going to be public testimony on here, so I'm just sort of like saying, hey, there's a little bit of time left, and ask your veterans, new people or whatever, I do my homework. And particularly if a stolen car is noticed in a curtilage or on a home where there's some strong privacy interest. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I just shoot over the bow in general type concerns, and I hope you're still all open to think about those. And I hope the chair, as you know, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Chair, to the chief author, I've worked with all folks, Democrats, Republicans, and all this. And this is an issue and an interest that doesn't hit party interest. It's people's interest. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I just wanted to do that little shoot over the bow, let you know, and I'll be digging more into it as the bill progresses. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Newmeister. During the testimony, we heard about the need for penalty increase for tampering with a motor vehicle. We do have a bill carried by Representative Rapinski that will be coming forward on that. So there's an amendment coded House File 7A1. Who will be offering the amendment?
That would be me, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hudson, can you please describe the amendment?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair. Thank you. The A1 amendment authorizes a person to use force to aid another person, even if the person has the ability to retreat. This amendment is in response to a Minnesota Supreme Court decision that said a person must retreat if they have the ability to retreat rather than using force to aid another person. Now, when this decision came down, there was a pretty scathing dissent from Justice Paul Thiessen, former member of this body, and he stated in part that until now, and this direct quote, until now, the collective wisdom of judges nationwide over hundreds of years has never imposed a duty to retreat before making threats to deter an aggressor. And if you read the entirety of his dissent, which I reviewed this afternoon, one of the things that he points out is that this is not saying that any time that this is no longer a factor, whether or not there was an ability to retreat can't be taken into consideration when you're determining whether or not somebody acted improperly. It's just that with the decision that the court made, it takes that opportunity off the table completely. It draws what I believe he called a yellow line past which the ability to fact find is obstructed. And so this addresses that directly. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to point out the very peculiar and ironic circumstances under which this amendment is being offered. And in order to do that, I'll have to require a little bit of leniency from the chair and address the elephant in the room. And I do mean literally, because it's only the elephants that are in the room. And we've discovered over the course of the past 24 hours, which was the last time we were here in this room holding this committee for public safety, that one of the members of the absentee caucus that would be sitting in this room with us if they decided to come to work participated in instigating the incident that many of us were here to witness yesterday. An incident where I was sitting in that chair over there, not but 2-3 feet away from folks who were escalating. One of whom was holding a bullhorn, and by the way, I saw the moment that the hand went into the purse. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who had eyes on. We do have a room full of law enforcement professionals. And that moment of what is coming out of that purse, that applies to this situation right here. Being in the midst of aggression and escalation and the uncertainty of what somebody who's 2 feet away from you yelling in your face is about to do, that is directly applicable to what we're talking about here. Ultimately, the way that situation was resolved, which resulted in the total failure of the assailants themselves and their stated objectives of provoking a violent confrontation and or halting us from being able to conduct our business, is we all had to leave. We had to clear the room. We had to retreat in order for law enforcement to be able to do their job and clear the room and get us back into business, which we did, and we completed our business. So, this is something that should be adopted. I don't anticipate there's going to be a whole lot of resistance to adopting it, given the crowd that we have here with us today. But I just, once again, want to emphasize the irony of the fact that this very circumstance took place here yesterday, and that it was instigated by somebody who should be in this room. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Hudson. Chair Novotny, do you support this amendment?
I would consider this a friendly amendment, and I would ask for a green vote.
Any discussion on the amendment, members? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries and the amendment is adopted. Are there any questions for the bill author or any of the testifiers? Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sheriff Fletcher, if you have a moment there. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Has your agency seen an increased number of juveniles who are engaging in these carjackings or violent crimes at the behest of gangs? That's something that I've heard just through anecdotes with friends of mine that are in the law enforcement profession, and they're telling me that they're actually being recruited because of the incentive that Representative Pinto's bill allowed for.
Sheriff Fletcher, you can go ahead.
That's a great question. I'm going to answer it. I will tell you for future conversation, one of the top 5 gang experts in the country, Mike Martin, Under Sheriff Mike Martin, is right behind you, and he can maybe meet and discuss that. The gang environment has evolved over the last 40 years when the Gangster Disciples, Crips, et cetera, started coming to St. Paul, Minneapolis. It was much more organized then. Today, we're seeing kids that consider themselves in a gang. And the first part of your question is, yes, we've seen a lot of kids that consider themselves in gangs that are stealing, carjacking, robbing, et cetera. That is true. But we don't see a direct connection to the historical gangs or the hierarchy. Having said that, we have had some instances where kids are stealing cars for people, for adults. A very small number, though. For the most part, my biggest concern is the 100 to 150 kids that consider themselves in different gangs that are out there carjacking and stealing cars on a daily basis. I mean, every single day.
Representative Ingen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. I appreciate the insight. It's obvious that this is occurring more and more because we are not getting serious about it. They know that there is ample opportunity for them to get off, often with wraparound services. And to be quite honest with you, this entire committee feels like a fever dream in a lot of ways, because over the past 2 years, we have sat through hearing after hearing where we were diminishing the ability for law enforcement to do their job and do it well. It's time that we had this discussion, and I really appreciate your input.
Mr. Chair? There's no question that the juvenile crime problem is the #1 public safety issue that we have. And it's complicated not just by the fact that so many crimes are committed by kids, but that the justice system does not have a solution. I saw a story in the paper, I think Representative Novotny, you and the Maple Grove rep went over to Hennepin County and looked at the facility that was closed many years ago. We have the same problem in Ramsey. The Boys Totem Town was closed. There are very few resources to allow us to help these kids get out of addiction, get out of the gang environment. And so what we end up doing is virtually nothing at all, or sending them to Red Wing or Moorhead or some out of state. I mean, these stories have been covered by Fox 9 and others. There's no secret here. But it's a lot of pieces to the puzzle. Do we need some services to get out of addiction? Absolutely. But do we need a place for them to do that where they're not back at home robbing cars 2 days after we arrest them? Yes. We need options here, and the local agencies, the local counties ought to step up and provide more. I do understand Hennepin is coming with a big bill to do that, right? So, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sheriff. Representative Duran.
Thank you. This one's going to be for anybody who can answer this, I guess, question. Is there any privacy for stolen property? Is there expectation of privacy for any stolen property?
Are you regarding the stolen
Just
cars?
Stolen cars, any type of property, is there?
Well, it depends who you ask. I think, yes, there is, if it's a stolen briefcase that's locked and people have privacy items in there, I think when we recovered it, we would treat it such. We don't believe that a stolen car really has the expectation of privacy, because the person whose privacy is being violated is not the owner of the car. You know, there are people that have standing under law for privacy, and there are people that do not have standing. If someone steals a car, their privacy is not protected by where they're going.
Yes.
So there's, in my opinion, and several people that have researched, there's no expectation of privacy on behalf of the criminal that has stolen the car.
Representative Duran.
And that's what I was trying to get at here as, realistically, when you're stealing a vehicle, do you have the right to privacy inside a vehicle that does not belong to you? Or to be able to track your movement if we were going to throw a tracker on there? I believe in, my years that you don't have that, so.
We agree.
Actually, I have a question, Chair.
Chair Novotny, go ahead.
Sheriff Fletcher, as a follower on X of Minneapolis Crime Watch, I've seen several reports on that when they make an initial discovery on a stolen unoccupied vehicle, they'll take time to try to set up to catch the people involved. And it might be that, they might just be waiting for backup so that they could safely approach that vehicle. But the practice that they've been dealing with is that as soon as the suspects see that their vehicle is being watched, that they would call a fake call in a different part of the precinct, shots fired call, someone's been seriously injured, something like that. And we know that Minneapolis is relatively short-staffed anyway because of the losses. And it draws the assets to a different area so that then they can then hop in his car and leave. Have you had that situation in Ramsey County, that they're, using that tactic of drawing resources away? And is that something that, would be applicable in a situation that would be helpful?
Well, we can't, it's difficult to verify that the offender actually did that, but we have had cases where the coincidence of getting a serious call that may not materialize into a real call has occurred. I would say that's more so in Minneapolis than it is on our side of the river. We have greater assets in St. Paul and Ramsey County than Minneapolis does. So we wouldn't get called away as easily on our side, and our team focuses just on carjacked cars and stolen, so they would probably let someone else handle that distraction. But yes, we have had cases where we believe criminals have used distraction to try to get us away. In fact, it's happened while we're actually chasing them, that someone will call in and say there's a shooting over here, and turns out that case didn't exist, but people would have to stop pursuing, crazy as that is.
Chair Novotny.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Representative Duran, you have a question?
Yes, the follow-up of that, because I believe that we're going to have some issues with the tracking statute. You're not tracking the people inside the car you're tracking the vehicle that would be stolen, right? So just to clarify that.
Sheriff Fletcher?
Correct, but I don't wanna shy away from the fact that the only way you reduce crime is by arresting the criminals. And so we're tracking the car, the stolen car, for the purpose of arresting the person that stole it or is driving it.
Representative Durant?
But you would have no idea who's driving that vehicle, right? So, because this would be a problem, with the issues. We don't know who's driving these vehicles. That's why we need to stop them. That's why we need to be able to
Right.
use the resources we have around us to be able to maybe gather more information about the crime, but we don't know who's inside that vehicle at the time.
That's correct. It's not tracking of a named or identified individual. It's tracking of a stolen piece of equipment. And we've had this conversation the last couple of years since Neumeister mentioned in '22. The big concern seems to be, well, what if the owner recovers it? The statute's very clear already that we have to remove it once it's recovered, and we have to remove the tracker within 24 hours. Either way, the other part of the statute says we only get 24 hours to track it unless we're successful at getting a hold of the owner. Then we will track it longer. So this is a very short window. When we find a stolen, we can't get a hold of the owner, we track it temporarily until we're able to do that. And the 24-hour window would allow us to get a hold of them.
Representative Durant? Thanks for, Sheriff Fletcher, for the comments there clarifying that piece, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Chair.
Representative Steer?
Can I call Jeff Potts, Executive Director, up quick? I just want to get the other side of this. I understand that Mary Moriarty, Hennepin County Attorney, had put out a different opinion, so I just want that to be out in public, that this is the opinion, and so we have the other side. And I think Executive Director Potts can cover that.
Executive Director Potts?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chair. In Representative Steer, the reason we were trying to address this issue with fleeing vehicles and the use of tracking devices is it came to our attention that, as I mentioned, agencies were looking at this technology, and the opinion of the Hennepin County Attorney, as I understand, that was distributed to the chiefs in Hennepin County, is that in order to deploy a tracker, the officer had to have either permission from the owner, a search warrant, or confirmation that it was a stolen vehicle. And as you know, that isn't always easily accessible at the time you're following a car. Now, that car could be freshly stolen, so the computer system doesn't have information that it's stolen. The officers don't obviously have owner permission, nor would they have a search warrant at that point in time. We tried to express that we felt there was exigent circumstances in those cases to deploy the tracker. She disagreed and communicated that to the chiefs. And so that brought us back here last year to try to address this issue of vehicles that are fleeing, the ability to use a tracking device when they flee, and that's it. It's not to track the owner of the vehicle, the occupants per se, it's the vehicle, tracking the vehicle for the purpose of trying to recover it and also arrest those who are responsible for stealing it. And so we've been kind of stuck in this situation since that opinion came out from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Engen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question is actually for Mr. Zimmer. Thanks. I'll ask my question here as you walk up. So you mentioned that the BCA is tracking only incidents in which there's a pursuit of a fleeing vehicle. Would there be any benefit, not only to public data and public transparency, but for rank and file, the folks that are doing these pursuits, to know how many incidents occurred in general? We could potentially look at tracking that data.
Mr. Zimmer?
You know, it's a good question. I would hate to add just another burden onto police officers. I would leave that up to the profession to weigh in on that. I think the pursuit data allows, somebody like me to interpret what's going on in terms of fleeing. So I wouldn't advocate for additional burdens on law enforcement.
Thank you, Representative Engen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds as if Sheriff Fletcher also could shed some light on this.
I think that's a great question.
Sheriff Fletcher?
Mr. Chair, Representative Engen, great question. I would wholeheartedly endorse a requirement of that. Here's what happens as of today, and I'm on the street many nights. The St. Paul Police Department has a policy of no pursuit unless it's a recent offense involving a gun, a shooting, et cetera. And recent has to be within the last 8 hours because they will not authorize their officers to pursue cars. So what happens every day, multiple times, they find a car, it might be stolen, it might not be stolen. They find a car that they want to stop on traffic, they light it up, and it takes off. It's honestly, amongst our CAT unit, it's a department joke because it takes off, and guess what? They do not pursue, which is fine pursuant to their policy. No one has a record of that as a pursuit because it's a flee, but not a pursuit. And as such, it's not recorded. We have tried to get our communication center to code those differently, so it's not an investigative traffic stop that didn't stop, but rather a flee. But as of yet, there's no good record of people that flee when they're not pursued, and it is a majority of them.
Representative Steer?
Sheriff Fletcher, you're a highly decorated sheriff. You're well-known across the state. So in your opinion, why are agencies not pursuing vehicles?
Sheriff Fletcher?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I think they're afraid of the liability of being involved in some accident. And let me say, we terminate majority of our pursuits as well. Training, teamwork, tactics, all of our cars are unmarked. We have lots of trackers, we have stop sticks, we have every tool that's available. A lot of other departments do not. We've had 5 years of experience without any major incident involving our squad cars, but people do crash. It does happen. Of the hundreds and hundreds of chases we've had, sometimes the bad guy crashes. And the question for most policymakers is the risk worth the gain? And we've made the decision in Ramsey County that the gain is worth the minor risk. We mitigate that risk with highly intensified training, and we have some of the best at it. And so, you know, you have to make a commitment to train your people properly if you want to open this door, but some don't have the assets to do that.
Yeah, and would you agree for the most part that anything that happens in a pursuit is usually the offender actions? So we're not chasing people that aren't fleeing. It's anything that happens in that pursuit, the crash afterwards, it's all because of the offender's actions, not the police officer's actions that's trying to apprehend them.
I would say that when you say all, very, very close to all. There are small numbers of occasions where the police officer might have made a decision that he shouldn't have. Mr. Zimmer probably has the stats on whether the accidents were caused by the bad guy or by the officer. But my experience has been in 40-plus years that it's the bad guy's behavior in driving that causes the accident.
Representative Steer?
Thank you for that, and thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I do have a question. So my question is, a lot of times when you make these, the pursuits, it might be for a stolen vehicle or whatever reason they decide to leave. I think just last week we had one where, going to make a traffic stop and the guy fired a rifle at officers. A lot of these, if you don't prevent it, might have further incidents down the road. So when you make these stops, you don't always know what you're encountering.
Mr. Chair, very true. And I will tell you that in the majority of our stops, even when the cars are not stolen, there is a person in the car with a warrant, certainly no driver's license, and quite often gun or ammunition in those cars as well. And so, you know, Deputy Kill over here was fired at a year ago out the back of out the car. A guy leaned out with an automatic weapon or semi-automatic weapon and fired at him and struck him, not knowing for sure what was going on in that car. But yes, time and time again, there's other reasons that people flee, and they're not afraid any longer to shoot at us while they're fleeing. And let me just say this, if we don't stop them when we have the opportunity to, they will go on to hurt and injure other people in the meantime.
Thank you. That's kind of what I was leading towards. We have to trust our leaders in the community to keep our community safe and provide the tools. So thank you to your team. Thank you to law enforcement. Are there any other questions from the committee? Chair Novotny, closing comments.
Thank you, Chair Whitty. This bill has many, many provisions that we've been looking for a long time. Most importantly, for me, my number one thing is to save lives and prevent people from being hurt. Transparency is very important. We have several provisions in this bill about data that is, in almost every case, it's already collected. Almost every data point that we are asking for to be on a publicly searchable database is already collected. There are a couple of things that were just modifications of information that's already collected, but this is an age of transparency. We think that's very important because we think that the public should have confidence in the system and that it is working for them. They also need to know what is being done and what is not being done and why it's not being done. Our publicly searchable databases would make everyone able to go in and find that information. The information now that is in some courthouse and in some database, and it's scattered around, and unless you know how to look for it, unless you have access to those facilities to do the searching, it's not there. We think that knowing how you're being served by your public is very important, and this is, we're in the age of information. Everyone should have this. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Moving on to the issue of fleeing. In almost every fleeing situation that I can think of, the vehicle involved is subject to forfeiture, either because it's the owner or a person that had permission to use the vehicle, so the vehicle is subject to forfeiture, or it's stolen. If it's subject to forfeiture, law enforcement does not need a warrant to confiscate that vehicle. I don't know of any other situation that we would apply this logic to tracking something that is subject to forfeiture. And as all the people that have spoke here have pointed out, it's such a dangerous situation. If we can back off, allow these officers to put some space, you won't be like Deputy Kill, who took rounds trying to stop this vehicle. Thank you for doing what you do, and I'm so glad that you're here today to be able to witness this, and everyone else on your team. So I don't understand the logic why that wasn't allowed to start with. So I do not see why it's even an issue on why a fleeing vehicle should not be allowed to use this life-saving technology. I really appreciate the direction that the MPPOA came up with for adding corrections, and we will see what we can do with that. Next stop for this bill is Ways and Means, and I'm on that committee, so we'll push it forward to that. Sheriff Fletcher brought up the desire to change the age for juveniles to be able to be charged with crimes and reversing Representative Pinto's bill from last year. We already have that bill. We will be bringing that forward. And yes, I believe it is Representative Engen's bill at this time. For the fleeing reports, the modifications could be done. It's a BCA form. As a former supervisor of patrol, having to fill out those reports, can be cumbersome. I would suggest if we're going to increase the number of reports that we will be requiring to be filed, that we simplify them. It gets pretty cumbersome tracking the ORIs and the miles and things like that. So maybe a separate form from a pursuit that wasn't, a simplified report for a vehicle that flees but is not pursued, we could look at. With that, I think this is a great bill, and I would appreciate a vote in the positive on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Novotny. Would you like to renew your motion that House File 7 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to Ways and Means Committee?
That is my motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion prevails and House File 7 is passed to the Ways and Means Committee.